Hello, and welcome to the Your Food Matters podcast. This is Dr. Sue Kleiner, and I'm here with my wonderful friend and colleague, Erik Bustillo.
What's happening, everybody? Hey, Sue, nice to see you.
Good to see you, Erik. A little different day and time as our usual scheduled time, but we're in good shape. I got to go to Cleveland, Ohio, to my high school alma mater, Cleveland Heights High School, and I am so proud of being a recipient of the 2023 Hall of Fame induction ceremony.
That's so cool. It's so cool. And again, I've mentioned it to you before, but so well deserved for sure. So,
I will show
congratulations on that.
everybody. Look at just like my athletes, I got well, this isn't exactly gold. It's kind of a, I don't know, bronze medal, something like that.
But
But
it's cool.
but I a distinguished alumni Hall of Fame. So it was really fun. They draped it around our necks and it was a fabulous ceremony and my fellow inductees were amazing. And I guess our big claim to fame is that either a year or two ago, so the Kelsey brothers from the NFL, the Giants and the Chiefs, they are alumni of Cleveland Heights High School, my high school, and they were also inducted into the Hall of Fame. So now it's an even bigger deal.
Oh, no way. On the 2023 Hall of Fame?
No, no, no. They were either
Sometime
last year or
before.
the year before. Yeah.
I got
Yeah.
you.
So it only took them 10 years from graduation. It's taken me multiples of that. So, but it's all good.
But you made it.
On the stage with me was literally a Guinness Book of World Records physician, a neurologist who is the oldest practicing physician. That happened when he was 98. He's now 102. And let me tell you, keep your brains healthy. This gentleman was amazing. And to witness for the first time in my life a 102-year-old brain that was fully healthy, functioning, sharp, witty. He was amazing. He was somewhat frail, needed help going up and down the steps. But let me tell you, he gave the best speech. He was just, I mean, it was something to behold. It was awesome in the true sense of the word. So,
That's
and a
amazing.
whole bunch of other cool people. So it was a good couple of days back in my hometown, Cleveland, Ohio, and went to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. I'd never
Oh,
been there
cool.
before. Yeah, so saw high school buddies and teachers, and just a shout out to the teacher that made such a big difference for me and kept me in school, kept me from dropping out, was Mr. Fred Mills, and I even got to talk to him on the phone and thank him while I was there. So it was all a good time.
That's amazing. Good. And again, so well deserved. And I'm sure it's just an honor to be able to be there with people that you also find amazing. Man,
Yeah.
102. Wow. Like, talk about longevity.
I know. And his motto is make your work your hobby. If you think of it as your hobby, it's always fun and interesting. And that's how he has maintained his work life balance for, you know, 80 plus years. He was pretty amazing, pretty amazing.
Wow.
Anyway,
Love that.
so today, to get to our topic uh, and why your food matters, today is vitamin D. So we're
Mhm.
really drilling down on some very important nutrients. Um, our last episode was iron. If you didn't get to that, go to it, listen to it. Super important macro mineral. Today is vitamin D, and it's really interesting because as dietitians and nutritionists, we've always talked about it as a vitamin, but the definition of a vitamin is a compound required in minute amounts to support health. And actually, vitamin D is more of a hormone than a vitamin. So it is misnamed. We understand it so much more now and what all its functions are. And so when you think of it, holy smokes, it's really a hormone. you better have enough of it or things go south pretty quickly.
For sure. Speaking of going south, there's this general rule of thumb, if you will, that anyone who lives north of Florida should be supplementing with vitamin D, because we have access to so much sun year round. And the reason for that is we vitamin D is one of those nutrients that, or like you said, some people will refer to it as a pro hormone or hormone. Um, but it's one of the ones that we can produce ourselves, where we don't technically have to consume it,
Right.
because when our bare skin makes contact, or when the UV rays make contact with our bare skin, it triggers this host of events to happen in our body, where the ultraviolet rays and this pre-vitamin D gets produced. Then that pre-vitamin D starts attaching to these like building proteins, if you will, that then get transported to the liver. And then obviously from there, it just kind of goes, it gets activated, right? This active form, and our body makes vitamin D. But I find that quite interesting because, I mean, I live in sunny South Florida, and I am not exaggerating when I say this. I've seen, I don't know if hundreds or thousands of blood work results would be
Hmm.
the most accurate, but it's been a lot. And most of those have had vitamin D in them. And I'm always interested to see where those levels are.
Yeah.
And I can tell you that most people, so the medical range is 30 to 100 if you're looking at the number here in the United States. Um, and most of the, personally, I like to see those values a little bit higher. I like it maybe closer to 60, anywhere from 60 and above, even if it's at
So, and
100.
and we're talking about nanograms per milliliter because
Yeah.
there's also different measure values, but your values you're talking about nanograms per milliliter, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, thanks for clarifying. Um, and I can't tell you how many people I saw that were below 30.
Hmm.
I've seen as low as, oh gosh, I don't remember if it was 6 or 8.
Right.
A bunch of people in the teens, majority are somewhere in the 20s. But then again, me just kind of thinking, all right, I like an optimal number, liking it at least 50 or above, like at the minimum kind of thing. I can't tell you how many people were, again, below 30 or somewhere in the lower 30s. And they live in South Florida, right?
Right, right. So there are things that will interfere with the UV light getting actually to your skin to cause that conversion and activation. One is, particularly in South Florida, sunscreen. So the whole point of sunscreen is to block the UV rays. So you're not getting that blast of sunshine where you need it when you're wearing sunscreen. So one of the recommendations is, and dermatologist approved, is 15 minutes daily to um, expose. It's got to be large areas of your skin. So typically we say your face, arms, and legs to the sun unprotected. And I think there's two reasons for that. Typically, our face, arms, and legs are more frequently exposed to the sun, so may have some protection built in to begin with, whereas your abdominal area and your back may be very infrequently exposed and you could burn more quickly or get sun damage more quickly. If you don't want it on your face, fine, do your arms and legs. The other is if you wear sun protective clothing, or, if you're out doing sports and part of your equipment is your uniform, like if you're playing football and you do have perhaps long sleeves or long pants on. So even if you're outside a ton in the summer, but you are covered up, you won't get that sun exposure. And so we do see it in athletes that are always in indoor athletes, that's common, but even in outdoor athletes, like you're saying.
Yeah, for sure. And something that I think is important to add to that, is ideally it would be maximum skin exposure. So obviously you don't want to burn, but if you have the ability to get out there naked, then I mean, by all means, just be
Yeah,
mindful
right.
that you might burn your parts.
Or that there's a fence and you don't have anybody peeping over it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Just please don't go out and go for a naked jog and then blame it on me. But Eric said something else I think is important to keep in mind is skin color. So
Right.
individuals who are a little bit darker will need a little bit more exposure to the sun to kind of get those natural benefits and the natural production of it. And someone who's of lighter skin tone has to be mindful of, well, hopefully just not burning.
Right.
Um,
Right.
so, and I'll never forget one of the lowest values that I saw was in a patient who became like a buddy of mine. And a dark skinned individual, African American descent, and a former NFL football player. And I remember very well, he was at an 8, his vitamin D levels.
Wow. Yeah,
Yeah.
really low.
Mm-hmm.
So with that's symptomatic for sure, and they don't even know it. You keep thinking, am I depressed? What's wrong with me? Am I not sleeping well? Am I not eating right? You have all these other explanations besides actually there's something wrong. And vitamin D can be mysterious in that way because so many of the symptoms um, reflect like emotional or mental health issues, and that's not what it is at all. It's a vitamin D insufficiency. So, um, going back to the blood values, there is an important thing to understand, and that is that all physicians are not in agreement on these blood values. There is values that are promoted by sort of, it may be more family practice, American Medical Association, that says that are based on purely bone health and no other function of vitamin D. And so we're going to get into all its functions. But when you only look at the research on bone health and fractures, that says, well, if you're at, around 30 milligrams per milliliter, nanograms per milliliter, excuse me, then that's probably sufficient. And you don't want to be lower than 20. But for further health benefits, the uh, Endocrinology Society says more similar to the values that Erik is talking about, 40 to 60 nanograms per milliliter. And so, depending on what physician you get to, you may, and what lab you're working with, many of the labs still label the lower levels as normal. And so, Erik and I are in agreement on this that we like to see the higher levels. uh, we know that when it comes to vitamin D, as its function as a very potent anti inflammatory compound, these higher levels lead to better performance. Other things that vitamin D does besides bone health, which is what most people understand, vitamin D helps you absorb and utilize calcium and transport it into your bones.
And that's a
It
big one
also,
too. So
yeah,
that's a big one to
yeah,
keep in mind because what you just said about the endocrine society, like if we were to think of vitamin D as like a as a precursor, this pro hormone, almost like as a steroid type with
right,
steroid type
right,
functionalities. Then
right,
imagine like in this way, it's going to be seen. It could be seen as an endocrine molecule because now it's impacting calcium absorption, and then it has impact or interactions with like the parathyroid, with your kidneys, in so many
right.
ways that it's going to function.
Right, right. And that's a definition of a hormone, right? That it's produced in one place but functions somewhere else. And so that is so important. So bone health is really critical, but also it bolsters immunity, it boosts mood when it's taken with omega-3 fats like DHA. It assists in neuromuscular control. It helps regulate body weight. It helps prevent aging related inflammation and inflammation just in general. It actually interacts with telomeres. This is part of our DNA structure, our genetic structure. So it helps lengthen them the longer they are. it is an indicator of health and longevity. The shorter they are, it usually is somehow associated with chronic disease and shorter lifespan.
And thinking
And
about the 102-year-old gentleman, right?
right,
And
right.
longevity, when you think
Yep.
about telomeres and living as long as we can, right? How can we support our DNA from like obviously a cellular level?
Totally. And really so in conjunction with that decreases the risk of many chronic and degenerative diseases. So vitamin D is so important, and we see it in active individuals like Eric was saying. When they have low vitamin D levels, it is manifested in their sports performance, in their emotional well-being, in their mood, in their mental energy, and their ability to move. I like, as you said, where I saw the lowest levels I've ever seen was when I was working with the Seattle Storm. So indoor sports, um, many uh, females who are of darker skin, but not only those women, sort of all of them were particularly low in vitamin D. And what they would report is, well, I can get up and do my workout, and they are so amazing, genetically gifted athletes, and so dedicated to working hard that they're pushing through, but they are really pushing. And they say, I feel like I'm dragging up and down the court. And so we get their vitamin D levels back up, and they have a new lease. They just feel like they're in a new body. So it is critically important to check vitamin D levels. This is another thing that's become controversial. There was a period of time over the last decade where insurance companies started paying for some vitamin D testing because it was recognized as an issue. Somehow it has kind of fallen off of that critical factor that should be checked. And so for many people, you will have to pay to have a vitamin D blood test. I think it's worth it. If you find it is many, many hundreds of dollars, keep checking other labs, because some labs will do it for $36 or $52. And then all of a sudden, you find another lab where it costs you $400. We're sorry that the medical system is such a tangled web, but
Yeah,
um, but
big time.
we do really support this kind of testing.
For sure. And it's for me it's so cool to be able to see, like, yeah, there are studies that show potential, risk for decreased cardiovascular disease. Things like hopefully like the decreased risk of colorectal cancer by having
Right,
sufficient vitamin D levels, increased insulin sensitivity, which is pretty much always a good thing. Um, and even thinking about it again, being this pro hormone, and just for people to know, it's like imagine you have vitamin D like at this base level that could have an impact on something like DHEA, let's just say, which could then have an
right,
impact on something like testosterone, from
right.
something so base level, right? A vitamin that you can take like as a supplement or from the sun. But then the anecdotal things for me are also pretty fascinating because when I hear someone just say like, I started taking vitamin D and my energy levels, they just like they went through the roof, or my
Mhm.
mood just improved so much, kind of similar to what you were saying, like along the lines with the athletes that you were working with. It's just so nice to see someone obviously take that recommendation, start taking the supplement in this particular case, and notice this physical change, particularly in how they feel, and they can just function better as a human being.
Yeah, and this indoor athlete piece is really important because, as I said, I almost, and it wasn't every athlete, but it was almost all of them were below 20. So,
Mm.
and there were some that were below 10. I mean, just like jaw-dropping numbers. How are
Yeah,
you playing your sport, right? There's more than 1,000 genes that are vitamin D responsive in the human body, and many of those cross over into athletic performance. So, I mean, this is a really big deal. The interesting thing is, so here we're talking about get exposed to sunshine, but then we say taking vitamin D supplements. Well, Our body really was not designed to this point to absorb vitamin D very well through our gut, our stomach, intestines, etc., because it was so good because we had all this UV exposure. But we can absorb it through the gut. Every person is different in their ability to absorb, both from food and from supplements. And so while one person may not need any vitamin D supplementation and doesn't get a lot of sun exposure, but they're a great milk drinker. Maybe they have 3 cups of milk a day and they have several servings of fatty fish a week. So milk is fortified with vitamin D. This is cow's milk. Any milk type, a nut milk, anything that you drink, or a soy milk, hopefully is fortified with vitamin D because it's such a great vehicle to get vitamin D in. It's something that people do drink on a regular basis. Um, if somebody like that may be fine, they're taking in enough vitamin D and they are a really good absorber, and someone else may not absorb much at all. And so that's why recommendations for, if we would say, vitamin D supplementation ranges on a daily basis for someone who has no interaction with any assessment, somewhere around 600 international units to 2,000 international units a day. That's average. And again, the low number may be enough for one, the high number may not be enough for others. And they need to take, and especially if you come up with low levels, much higher. You can take 10,000 international units a day. You may have to go in and actually have a vitamin D shot, an injection, because your absorption levels are so poor. So, some people take 20,000 units twice a week. So you need to get to a physician that can work with you on this. Typically, that's a physician um, prescription, but dietitians can work with you pretty closely on this as well. And you should, because you do want to also max out your food choices.
Most definitely, yeah. To me, it's always interesting because like, I haven't found very common foods that are great sources of vitamin D. I do think that like milk and certain fortified foods for sure, even like mushrooms are like an okay source of vitamin D. Sockeye salmon is actually a really great
Right,
source of
right.
vitamin D, which I
Fatty
don't consume,
fish.
but
Yeah, yeah,
yeah. And I tend to be an individual who like likes to allow people to understand, like, look for these particular foods. If you can get some sun exposure, great. If this is just not going to happen, then I'm a huge proponent of supplementation. But I always give this fair warning of, be mindful of this tolerable upper limit where if you're taking more than 20,000 IU on a very regular basis, you're increasing risk for toxicity of vitamin D. And because
right,
it is a fat soluble vitamin, if we do take it in higher levels, it can stay in our system a little bit longer. Where water soluble vitamins like the B vitamins and vitamin C, because they're water soluble, our body does a good job of using what it needs and getting rid of what it doesn't. With fat soluble, it might linger in the system a little bit longer. But it can just vary so much for people. And that's where I think, chatting with a dietitian can be helpful because, like you said, in some cases, taking 600, 800 IU might be great. In other cases, maybe even taking 10,000 a day would be
right,
recommended.
right,
Um,
right. So
so,
you start to supplement and then get retested again.
mhm.
So there's 2 different forms that we typically see in vitamin supplements. We see vitamin D2, which you might see called 25 hydroxy vitamin D. And then you have vitamin D3, which is 25 hydroxy vitamin D3. Um, they it's called otherwise calcitriol, and vitamin D2 is calcidiol. You don't have to remember D2 and D3 basically. So, it is always recommended to take vitamin D3 if you can. It is most well absorbed. It is the form of the active vitamin D that in the body that Erik was talking about. However, if you are vegan, vitamin D2 is the plant-based form. So, so that's important to know. Understand that you might need to take a little more because it just is not as active or as easily absorbed, but it is definitely still still absorbed, not as easily as D3. So, another one of those cases where when we talk about if you depend 100% on plant sources, you need to know what you're doing and don't just do it on your own. If you are low in vitamin D, talk to your healthcare practitioner, talk to your dietitian, and get advice on how much you should take, uh, how you should take it. Should you take it with something else rather than just with water on its own? All of these factors matter.
For sure. And just a couple of like simple tips, I think, also as far as supplementation goes, is I like to encourage people to take it with fat, like olive oil or with fish oil,
Right.
just for helping with absorption and all that. And in some cases, I know some people are like they're police about this thing, and it's like it doesn't have to be every single person. But an interesting vitamin that goes in conjunction with vitamin D3 would be vitamin K2, and helping with its absorption and all that. But again, that's not for everybody. I prefer just the vitamin D3 supplementation if we're going to do it that way. But still, with all the supplementation and food talk and all that, I still encourage people to get outside and go for a walk. You know, maybe in the earlier morning when the sun isn't beaming down or anything. Get a little bit of vitamin D out there. It's good for your brain and mental health, and just help support your mood. Being outside is, I think, where we belong most of the time.
For sure, for sure. So, Erik, I think we should close up shop here and get outside.
Agreed. I'm ready. I'm out of here.
So, for all of you up here in the Pacific Northwest or north latitudes of Florida or North Carolina, definitely have your vitamin D checked. See if you need to supplement, if you need to increase those foods rich in vitamin D that are fortified, like dairy products and other beverages. As well as eating your fatty fish that gets you your omega-3s in as well, or other plants rich in those. And we will figure out what our topic is for next time. And
Stay tuned.
uh, look forward to talking to you all again soon. Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed this podcast, please share it with your friends. We are on all the podcast platforms as well as the Move Nutrition Network on the YouTube
On
channel.
YouTube. Yep. Thank you, Sue, and thanks everyone for listening. I appreciate you all.
Take care. See you next time, Erik.
Bye. See ya.
Bye.